Hello there everyone, my name is David Luchford and welcome to lesson 35 of my Ancient Greek course. Today's lesson is on particles, but before we talk about what particles are, let us take a look at my virtual sets of shelves. Because if we do that, we shall see that in the past week, Fred has bought me 5 virtual amphorae and so has someone. So Fred and someone, I would like to say thank you very much for supporting my channel. I greatly appreciate it. And ladies and gentlemen, you can see that we have just one shelf left in this set of shelves. So if you would like to add a virtual amphora to it or virtual amphorae to it, then you can do so by going to the link in the description below. But there's something else I need to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, and that is that an individual, a kind and generous individual named Bill, supported my channel by donating on YouTube through the Super Thanks system. And I'm mentioning this because he donated a significant amount and I feel like I must recognise his generosity. So Bill, thank you very much for supporting my channel. However, ladies and gentlemen, as Bill did not donate through Buy Me a Coffee, he technically did not buy me a virtual amphora, but I feel like I need to recognise his support nonetheless. And so, I need to do some DIY. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you will see that I have put up this painting featuring Bill's name as a recognition of his incredible generosity, which was via YouTube as opposed to Buy Me a Coffee. Thank you very much once again to Bill, Fred and someone for supporting my channel. And thank you very much to everyone who has supported my channel in the past also. I'm so grateful for all of your support. With that said, let's talk about particles. Particles are small words that appear in most Greek sentences. Particles are these words that are pervasive throughout Greek texts. If you read a Greek text, then most of the sentences in it will probably feature a particle or two. These words are everywhere in Greek. And these are small words, as I put in the first point. And their meanings are often correspondingly small, in that these words do not usually change the meaning of the whole sentence in a big way. In fact, some of the time, it's appropriate to not translate a particle, because the particle is doing something that is untranslatable, or not translatable in a way that sounds nice and natural in English. But a lot of the time, we can translate particles, but they just don't have a big impact on the overall meaning of the sentence. However, they do sometimes change the meaning of the sentence significantly, and they almost always give us a better idea of the meaning of a sentence. So they're worth knowing about. We do need to know about them, especially considering how prevalent they are in Greek. They are everywhere in Greek. A bit like physical particles are everywhere around us. Now, most particles are either adverbs or conjunctions. An adverb is a word that modifies a verb, and a conjunction is a connecting word, like and, for example. Now, before we look at some examples of particles, there is a distinction I would like to make you aware of, and that is between prepositive and postpositive particles. Prepositive particles are those that come first in a sentence or clause, while postpositive particles are those that come after the first word in a sentence or clause. Now, postpositive particles need not come directly after the first word. Some of them often do, but they just need to come later than the first word in the sentence or clause. Whereas prepositive particles will come first in a sentence or clause. But some particles can either come first or after the first word. They have the ability to be either prepositive or postpositive. Okay, with that said, let's now learn about 10 important Greek particles. And let's learn about them in relation to where they come in a sentence, whether they're prepositive, postpositive, or capable of being either. Let's start with some prepositive particles, and the first of these you have already met. The first one is ara. Now, ara is prepositive. It comes at the start of a sentence or clause, and it indicates a yes or no question. It could be thought of as meaning, is it the case that? But you don't translate it that way. You just see ara and know that it's signifying that the sentence is a yes or no question. And I have put the circumflex on top of the first alpha here. Now, I know I'm inconsistent in this regard, okay? I said I'm not putting accents on the Greek words, but in this instance, I felt like I had to because of its utility. This is one of the places where knowing something about accents is useful. This word, ara, indicating a yes or no question, will have a circumflex above the first alpha, always. And it's good to know because there is another word that we shall learn about, which is also ara, alpha, rho, alpha, but it doesn't have the circumflex. So that helps us to distinguish these two otherwise identical forms. Anyway, that's our first prepositive particle. The second one is air. This also always has a circumflex, and since it's prepositive, it comes at the start of a sentence or clause, and it's a synonym of ara. It also indicates a yes or no question. So it's another way of signposting a yes or no question. Let's now go on to some postpositive particles, starting with ara. This is ara without the circumflex. This ara is different in that it's postpositive, so it will come after the first word in a sentence or clause. And on top of that, it doesn't have the circumflex. So those are two things that we can use to tell which ara we're dealing with. This one, the one without the circumflex, means then or therefore, in the sense of, he must be a philosopher then. It's used when the speaker has inferred something. Let's look at another postpositive particle, gar. We have seen this in a previous lesson. Gar means for in the sense of because. It's a sense in which we don't really use the word for now that often in modern spoken English, but it's the traditional translation of gar. To explain the sense in which I mean this, we could say, I went to the shop for I was hungry. Now that means I went to the shop because I was hungry. It's an old-fashioned sense of the word for. And that's how this word gar is used. And as it's postpositive, it will come after the first word in the sentence or clause. The next word is ge. Ge means at least or at any rate. Next we have the particle de. De is everywhere in Greek. De means and or but. However, you often do not translate de because you can have a string of sentences where de will be near the start of each of them. It won't be directly at the start since it's postpositive, but it will be near the start, often sandwiched in between two words that are going together, like in the middle of a prepositional phrase or in the middle of a definite article and noun. De can be sandwiched in the middle of those. And it literally means and or but. However, it's just used to connect sentences, to link sentences to each other. So for instance, in the passage, the man walked to the agora and then he went home, and then he went to a party, the word and there at the start of the second and third sentences would be de. It's connecting those sentences. But it's a bit repetitive to keep saying and in English like that, even though they do it in Greek quite often. And so you often don't translate de, but quite a bit of the time you can, okay? So if you can translate de, then do it, if it sounds natural to say and or but in that place. But if it doesn't, then you are free to omit it, because it's a bit too repetitive to keep saying and or but in English. The next particle is der. Der means then or indeed, however it's quite tricky to translate in some circumstances. It's essentially emphasizing something. It's an emphatic particle, and sometimes it will sound unnatural to say then or indeed, and sometimes you do need to omit it from your translation, even though it colours the meaning of the sentence differently, in that you can see that there's some emphasis there, but it might be hard to reflect that in your translation. And finally, we have the postpositive particle un. This one will also always have a circumflex, but I haven't put it there because you're not going to confuse it with another word. Un means therefore or so. And you often see it near the start of a sentence, but it won't be the first word since it's postpositive, it will be after the first word. Okay, I also have two particles that can be either prepositive or postpositive for you. The first of those is Allah. Allah means but, often in the sense of but rather, where you're saying not this thing, but rather this thing, for example. Allah can be at the start of a sentence or clause, but it can also be after the first word in a sentence or clause. And the second word that can be either the first word or after the first word is kai. Kai means and, or also, or even, or actually. Those are four crucial meanings of kai. And it should be relatively clear from the context which meaning it has. So for instance, if you had ho aner kai herguner, then it would probably mean the man and the woman. Whereas you could get from the context that it's meaning also, that the person is saying something is in addition to something else, and likewise for the meanings even and actually. You should be able to tell from the context a good amount of the time which meaning is being employed. So here are 10 essential Greek particles, organised by whether they're prepositive, postpositive, or either. Please do pause the video and ensure that you've got them noted down for your reference. Let's now look at some examples of sentences with particles in them. Here we have two sentences. Hoi Helenes tus persas Nikosin, metade te namachian, hos strategos tuis stratiotais legei. So the first sentence is, the Greeks defeat the Persians. The Greeks are in the nominative plural, the Persians are in the accusative plural, and we have nika or, which can mean defeat, and here they are doing it. This was the ending usin, but it's contracted with the alpha at the end of the verb stem to make orsin. So, the Greeks defeat the Persians. Meta de tan naumachian. Now, here we have de, which means and or but. It's that connecting particle which we see everywhere in Greek. And since it's postpositive, it's coming after the first word. But in our translation, it will be the first word, as we shall see. Anyway, as I said, der often intervenes. It often gets in the middle of prepositional phrases, as it has here with meta tan naumachian, which is a preposition with a prepositional object. And it can also get in between definite article and noun phrases. It can get in the middle of a definite article and the noun that that definite article is applying to. So you see der sandwiched in the middle of words that are going together. So, in light of that, we know meta tan naumachian is a prepositional phrase meaning after the naval battle. Meta here means after, since it's governing the accusative. But we've got der, so we're going to translate this here as and or but. So far we've got the Greeks defeat the Persians, and after the naval battle, o strategos, the general, lege, speaks tois stratiotais, to the soldiers. I say to the soldiers because they're in the dative plural there. So you can see how this particle der is working. It's coming after the first word. In particular here it's coming second, as it often does, and it's sandwiched in between words that are going together. However, we translate it as the first word in this sentence. We say and after the naval battle. If we got the impression that this sentence was contrasting with the previous one, then we would say but. But I can't see any contrast being made here. Now, I did say that der is often untranslated, and that is the case, for instance, if you imagine this story continuing with lots of things that happened following the general speaking to the soldiers, and you had a der at the start, or near the start, I should say, of each sentence, then you would not keep saying, and then this, and this, and this, and this. You couldn't do that in English. So only translate it where it sounds appropriate to in English. And there is the translation. The Greeks defeat the Persians, and after the naval battle, the general speaks to the soldiers. Let's look at a second example of a sentence using a particle. Ho aner epimelos badisdei, xipos gar pere. This says, the man is walking carefully. Epimelos means carefully. We'll look at how adverbs are formed later in the course. But for now, just note that this means carefully. So the man is walking carefully. Xipos gar pere. Gar is the particle we have here, and it means for in the sense of because. For pere, he is carrying xipos, a sword. So, the man is walking carefully, for he is carrying a sword. Meaning, because he is carrying a sword. So he doesn't want to, trip over while he's carrying a sword. Or perhaps the sword is precious and he doesn't want to damage it. Maybe it's an antique. Either way, that second clause, xipos gar pere, is explaining this first one here. It's providing an explanation for the first one, so that for is explanatory. Let's now look at some more examples. Here we have a conversation between two individuals that I've named A and B. We could call them alpha and beta if you want. Person A says, Ar ich tun pere Herr Gunnar? And person B says, Uma dir, Herr Gunnar u pere ich tun alla botrun. Now, ar, the prepositive particle, is indicating a yes or no question. Here it's been elided. I should say that particles are very frequently elided, like prepositions are. So you should expect to see vowels at the end of particles dropped in response to the next word beginning with a vowel or diphthong. So we know that this is a yes or no question from this particle here. Then we have ich tun, which is a fish in the accusative singular. Pere is he, she, or it carries, and herguna is the woman in the nominative singular. So this literally says, is it the case that the woman is carrying a fish? But we will translate it as, is the woman carrying a fish? And person B says, U ma dia. U in this context means no, and ma dia means by Zeus. It is a phrase we have met before. In particular, we met it in the lesson on the simple negative u, uk, uch. So this person says, no, by Zeus. Herguna u pere ich tun alla botrun. The woman is not carrying a fish, but rather a bunch of grapes. These are 2 3H nouns here. There we see another particle, alla, meaning but, and here it is meaning but in the sense of but rather. So we could translate it as but rather. Overall then, we have person A saying, is the woman carrying a fish? And person B says, no, by Zeus, the woman is not carrying a fish, but rather a bunch of grapes. I don't know what context this conversation that I've created is happening in. Maybe, person B has said, without looking, guess what the woman I'm looking at over there is carrying? And person A says, is the woman carrying a fish? Person B then shuts that down and says, no, she's carrying a bunch of grapes. And here is an illustration of what person B says there. Herguna u pere ich tun alla botrun. The woman is not carrying a fish, but rather a bunch of grapes. That is a big bunch of grapes. It might in fact be 2 bunches of grapes in reality. But we can pretend that it's 1 bunch of grapes so that the caption is accurate. What a wonderful illustration. But we can continue this story and look at some more particles. Person B might then say, idu botrun pere kai ho aner. Now, idu is an important Greek word meaning look. It was traditionally translated as behold. Anyway, person B says, look. This is a bunch of grapes in the accusative singular. Pere is he, she, or it carries. Kai can mean and, but it can also mean also, even, or actually. And then we've got the man in the nominative singular. So, look, the man is carrying a bunch of grapes. And given what's just been said in the conversation, I would say it's best to translate Kai here as either also or even. You could say, look, the man is also carrying a bunch of grapes. So person B might have just spotted that a man, who's also with the woman, is also carrying a bunch of grapes. Or you might want to say even instead. I think even more context would help here. So I've put, look, the man is also carrying a bunch of grapes. And here is an illustration of that sentence. Idu botrun pere kai ho aner. Look, the man is also carrying a bunch of grapes. Once again, another big bunch of grapes. Let's continue this conversation with even more particles. Person A, the person that was guessing what the woman was carrying, might then say, ho un aner kai herguna pros heurten bainusin. Meaning, therefore, un is a postpositive particle, meaning therefore or so. Therefore, the man, kai herguna, and the woman, bainusin, are going pros heurten, to a festival. So person A here says, therefore, the man and the woman are going to a festival. Or, so, the man and the woman are going to a festival. Person B might then reply, pros deipnon gebainusin, meaning they are going to a deipnon. A deipnon is a meal, dinner, or banquet. Ge, at any rate, or at least. So person B might think that it's a bit much to infer they're going to a festival. He might say they are going to a dinner at any rate, or they are going to a banquet at any rate. So we've seen quite a few particles in these examples, and I hope that they help to elucidate how particles are used in Greek sentences. Because from this point onwards, in this course, you will see many particles, as you do in actual Greek. And in light of that, I have created an exercise for you. Here I have 3 bits of translation for you to do. The first 2 are just individual sentences, while the third is a small conversation between 3 people. Person A, person B, and person G, or in Greek, person alpha, beta, and gamma. So I hope you have fun translating that discussion, as well as the other sentences. I've glossed unfamiliar words in the word bank at the bottom, but given what you've learned about particles and given everything you've learned in the previous lessons, you should be fine translating these sentences. In light of that, please do pause the video and translate these sentences into English. Okay, let's now go through these sentences. Number 1 is Al hoiandres uch Helenis dusin, tus gar Helenas misusin. You should have translated this one as, but the men do not speak Greek, for they hate the Greeks. We know that it means this because al is the elided form of the particle alla, meaning but. And hoi andres is the men in the nominative singular. Uch means not, and Helenis dusin is they speak Greek. Helenisdor is the verb to speak Greek. You can see it's related to the words Hellas and Hellen, which we've already met. So we've got, but the men do not speak Greek. Tous gar Helenas misusin. Gar means for in the sense of because. For misusin, they hate the Greeks. The Greeks are in the accusative plural, so they must be the direct object. They're on the receiving end of the hate, which is unfortunate because how could anybody hate the Greeks? Number 2 is Xipos echeho perses. You should have translated this one as, is the Persian holding a sword? Or alternatively, does the Persian have a sword? We know that it means this because is indicating that the sentence is a yes or no question. Xipos means a sword, and this ending os for 3C nouns is either nominative singular or accusative singular. When we look at the rest of the sentence, we shall realise that here it's accusative singular. Eche is he sure it has or he sure it holds, and ho perseas is the Persian in the nominative singular. So, this literally says, is it the case that the Persian has or holds a sword? And that's why we could translate it either as, is the Persian holding a sword, or does the Persian have a sword? Finally, number 3 was our little conversation. You should have translated it as follows. Person A says, and the man always gives the woman gifts. Or you could say, but the man always gives the woman gifts. We don't know whether it's and or but here without the context. Or if you left it out, I would say that that would be okay if we knew from the context that it was safe to leave out. However, here I've recognised it by saying and. You could say but. When I say it, I mean the word der. Person B then says, the man loves the woman then. You could have said therefore instead of then. And person G says, he is courting the woman at least. Or you could say, he is at least courting the woman. You can put these particles in different places, often in English. But your translation should look something like this one. Now we know that it means this because Ho der aner te gunaiki dora ae didosin means but or and the man, and that man is in the nominative singular, so he's the subject. Te gunaiki is the woman in the dative singular, so this means to the woman or for the woman. We'll see which of those is better when we read the rest of the sentence. Dora is the accusative plural form of doron, meaning gift or present. It could be nominative plural in principle, but when we look at the rest of the sentence, we realise that it's got to be accusative plural. So these gifts or presents are the direct object. I means always, and didorsin is he, she, or it gives. So we've got, and the man always gives the woman presents. Or you could say always gives presents to the woman. If we put the indirect object first in English, then we can leave out the word to. In fact, we have to leave out the word to if we put the indirect object first in English. But if you put the woman second, then you would say the man always gives gifts to the woman. Person B then says the man, he's in the nominative singular here, and we've got the woman in the accusative singular, so she's the direct object. Then we've got pile. Pile is he, she, or it loves, or he, she, or it likes. Here we know the man is doing the action, so the man loves or likes the woman, ara. This ara is the postpositive one, the one that doesn't have a circumflex, and that one means then or therefore. Where person B has inferred from what person A has just said that the man therefore loves the woman, or you could say the man loves the woman then. And person G says, Tangunaika mneste uege. Now, Tangunaika is once again the woman in the accusative singular, so she's the direct object. Mneste uor is the verb to court, to woo, or to seek in marriage. And here it ends in A, so he, she, or it is doing the action. And they're speaking about this man. He is still the subject because we don't have a new nominative here, so we're going to say he for this verb. He is courting, or is wooing, or is seeking in marriage the woman, and ge means at least or at any rate. So this person G is saying, well, he may not necessarily love the woman, but he is courting her, at least. So person G, I think, is a bit sceptical of this man's intentions, of this man's true feelings. He might just be courting her or wooing her without truly loving her. So I hope you enjoyed translating this little chat as well as the other sentences, but with that said, we are now going to move on to a summary of our learning for lesson 35. In this lesson, we've learned that particles are small words that appear in most Greek sentences. Moreover, we've learned that their meanings are often correspondingly small, but you do need to know about them nonetheless. We learned that a prepositive particle comes first in a sentence or clause, while a postpositive particle comes after the first word in a sentence or clause, and we learned that some particles can be either. And we have learned 10 key particles, 3 of which we had actually encountered before, but now we've officially learned about particles. So we know more about those 3 words now than we did previously. In addition, we've learned 2 new nouns, deipnon, meaning meal, dinner or banquet, and doron, meaning a gift or a present. Both of them are 2 nouns beginning in delta, which is a bit of a coincidence. But anyway, as a fun fact for you, doron gives us the name Theodore and the female version, Theodora. Theodore and Theodora come from two Greek words, theos, meaning God, and doron, meaning gift or present. So Theodore and Theodora are gifts from God, etymologically. We also learned three new verbs. Hellenisdor, meaning to speak Greek. We learned idou, which is an imperative, meaning look or behold. In addition, we met the verb miseor, which means hate. This word gives us words like misanthropy, which is the hatred of mankind. And we also met the verb mnesteuor, which means to court, woo, or seek in marriage. With that said, let me say thank you very much for watching the video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it and or found it useful, please do give it a like, and please do comment if you have any feedback at all. And if you would like to see more videos like this, then please do subscribe. Also, now you can see I've put an image on the screen featuring a frog in an ancient Greek setting. We've got two ancient Greek guys looking at a frog right here. We could caption this image as Ugesti pruner alabatrachos. Esti means is. We'll learn more about the verb to be in the future. And uk is not. So this means it is not a pruner. A pruner is a toad. It is not a toad, but rather a frog. So this is what one of the guys is saying to the other. It is not a toad, but rather a frog. So one of them might have said, hey, idou, look at that toad. You know, behold, a toad. And the other one might have replied, Ugesti pruner alabatrachos. It is not a toad, but rather a frog. Thank you very much for watching the video, and I shall see you again next time.